A girl was fired for being kind to a customer. Sounds ridiculous, but it's true. Tessa Lane never imagined that a sincere greeting and a warm smile would cost her the job she had poured her heart and soul into. It happened on a Friday night, right when Grilltown was packed with customers, and everyone was busy charming the ones who looked rich, while the others scrambled to impress. Tessa made a different choice. She served a quiet man in plain clothes, sitting alone, overlooked by everyone else. She had no idea that this man wasn't just a random walk-in. He was the owner of the entire restaurant chain. But the worst part, the next day, she was fired, not for poor service, not for making a mistake, but because she broke an unwritten rule: focus only on the important guests. By doing something as simple as treating everyone with equal respect, Tessa had unknowingly painted a target on her back. What her manager, Mark, drunk on power, didn't realize was that the man they had all ignored that night held the future of the entire business in his hands. And then, just days later, everything changed. The one who was cast out came back as the one in charge. Have you ever been treated unfairly just for doing the right thing? Have you ever been dismissed because you didn't fit the image they wanted Tessa had? But instead of backing down, she stood tall, not with power, but with dignity, with a heart that refused to play along with pretense, and a belief that kindness could rebuild an entire workplace. This is the story of a woman who was pushed aside simply because she believed others deserved respect. But it's also the story of how she returned not for revenge, but to make things right, and to change everything. Welcome to the journey of Tessa Lane, the fired waitress, the unexpected manager, and the woman who's about to redefine what fairness means in a place that once treated it like a foreign concept. Grilltown, a popular restaurant chain nestled in the suburbs of San Antonio, Texas, prided itself on the slogan, "Serving you like family." But for Tessa Lane, who manned Station 4 behind the counter, family felt more like something she had to survive than something she belonged to. Her once white apron was now stained and faded, dotted with grease from countless shifts. The soles of her worn-out sneakers had thinned to the point where every step sliced into her feet after 12 straight hours on her feet, and the small name tag pinned to her chest. Tessa sometimes felt like the only reminder that she still existed within the system. No one really noticed Tessa. To management, she was a just good enough employee. To her co-workers, she was the girl who didn't know how to play sides. And to customers, only those who came in with plain clothes and humble eyes, people like her, knew that Tessa was the only one who greeted them with genuine eye contact. She didn't smile because she had to. She didn't gush for tips. Tessa served because she knew what it felt like to be invisible, because she once stood in food bank lines, begging for meals for her mother before cancer took her away. Because now she works full-time shifts while scraping together every last dollar to pay tuition for her younger brother, Drew, who's studying engineering. There's no room for mistakes, and absolutely no room for drama. Every day is a race against time, against the bills piling up, and against the quiet contempt that seemed to seep between shifts and smiles. Then came a Friday night like so many others. The line of customers stretched out the door. Janice, the blonde co-worker with a radar for rich vibes, was fawning over a man in a crisp suit jacket. That's when he walked in. There was nothing flashy about him. No swagger, no air of wealth or authority. Just a grey button-down, dark khakis, and worn leather shoes. He didn't scan the room for attention. He simply stood and observed. But Tessa felt something was different. Maybe it was the way his eyes didn't dismiss people but tried to understand them. Or maybe it was because he too was being ignored just like her. No one said a word. Not a single staff member stepped forward. No one thought he was worth serving. Except Tessa. She didn't overthink it. She just saw a man left standing alone in a place where everyone else was busy performing for the valuable customers. And she chose to do what should have been the norm. Tessa quietly stepped out from behind her station, adjusted her stained apron, and walked toward him. "Good evening, sir," she said gently. "Thank you for coming to Grilltown. How can I help you today?" The man turned to her, his eyes flickering with a trace of surprise. Then came a faint smile, not out of politeness, but because, for the first time that evening, someone actually saw him. "It's nice," he said, his voice warm and steady, "to finally be seen." Tessa smiled back, masking a hint of fluster. "We serve all our customers the same," she replied. He gave a quiet chuckle but said nothing more. She took his order, a double burger, no onions, crispy fries, and a black coffee. Simple order. But Tessa prepared it with full attention, as if he were the most important guest of the night. Because, in her eyes, everyone deserved to be treated that way. But not everyone agreed. Behind the counter, Janice leaned in, whispering something to Damon, the guy on drinks duty. Both cast sly glances toward Tessa, wearing the kind of smirk that didn't need words. "What a waste of time," Damon muttered. "She thinks she's some kind of savior again." Janice sneered. Tessa heard every word, but she didn't flinch. She was used to it by now. In a place like this, silence was self-preservation. What she didn't know was that the man she had just served with quiet care and sincerity had noticed everything, every dismissive glance, every whispered jab, every look of disdain. He missed nothing, and when he finished his meal, he didn't say much, just gave Tessa a thoughtful smile and said, "You've got a rare attitude. Not many people still take pride in what they do the way you do." Then he walked out, leaving Tessa standing there, with a strange feeling rising in her chest and one question quietly echoing in her mind. Who was he, really? Who was he? And why did his eyes make me feel like I'd just done something important? She didn't know it then, but that moment had just planted the seed for a storm that would soon uproot everything that once seemed so solid at Grilltown. The next morning, the atmosphere felt off. Gone were the usual half-hearted greetings and the cheerful hum of background radio. Instead, the air buzzed with a suspicious silence, broken only by pointed glances from Janice and Damon whenever Tessa passed by. She stepped behind the counter like she always did, tied her apron, and got ready to start a new shift. But before she could even log into the system, a voice called out behind her. "Tessa, office, now." It was Mark, the store manager. His tone was ice cold. Not a word more than necessary. Tessa froze for half a second. She glanced at Janice, who was trying and failing to hide a smug smile. And Damon suddenly looked very busy wiping down the soda station. The air in the office was thick with the stale smell of old coffee and damp paperwork. Mark sat behind his desk, fingers laced together, eyes void of expression. "Tessa," he said flatly, "we've reassessed our staffing situation. And unfortunately, you no longer align with the direction of this restaurant." She blinked, stunned. "You mean I'm being fired?" Mark nodded, as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. "We need to streamline the team, and your recent attitude seems out of sync. Because I served a customer everyone else ignored." Tessa shot back, heart pounding. Mark shrugged, offering neither denial nor confirmation. "We have a certain way of doing things here, and you unfortunately just don't fit." The words hit like a verdict. No hearing, no evidence, just a cold dismissal for someone who dared to go against the restaurant's unspoken rule of selective service. Tessa walked out of the office, a sealed envelope containing her final paycheck clutched in her hand. Janice looked at her silent, but with a look that said it all. "Told you so." Damon avoided her gaze, eyes fixed on the floor. The door clicked shut behind her. And as the bell above the glass entrance chimed, signaling the arrival of a new customer, Tessa knew she was no longer part of this place. On the way home, she didn't cry, but inside, something shattered. Not because she lost her job, but because she was punished for doing the right thing. And what she didn't know was that the man from the night before, now holding his phone and scrolling through his contacts, had just typed a single message, "I think. She's the one we've been looking for." The small apartment Tessa shared with her younger brother Drew was never quiet at dinner time. But that evening, there was a strange, heavy stillness. No pages turning from Drew's textbooks, no clink of spoons in bowls, only the ticking of the wall clock and the termination letter still lying open on the table, untouched. Tessa sat frozen in her seat, eyes blank, staring at nothing. She hadn't told Drew, not because she wanted to hide it, but because she didn't even know where to begin. She didn't want to be a burden. Drew was already juggling 3 jobs just to pay his own tuition. Tessa was the one holding things together, keeping them from getting evicted from their tiny apartment. And now, the last bit of stability she had was gone. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost let it ring out. But something, a strange intuition, made her pause. "Hello," she answered, her voice hoarse. A deep, courteous male voice came through the line. "Good evening, Miss Tessa Lane. My name is Mason Holt." Her breath caught. The name didn't ring a bell, but the voice was familiar. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" she asked, cautiously. "We met at Grilltown last night. You were the only one who welcomed me." Silence. Then Tessa whispered, barely audible, "You're the double burger, no onions." He chuckled. "And black coffee? You've got quite the memory." Tessa hesitated. I don't understand why you're calling." A pause. Then Mason spoke, slow, steady, and certain. "Because I believe people like you shouldn't be cast aside. They should be empowered." Tessa said nothing. Her heart was pounding in her chest. "Tomorrow," Mason continued, "I'd like to meet with you. I have a proposition, one that might change everything." She hesitated. Her world had just fallen apart. She wasn't sure she had it in her to entertain any kind of proposition right now. But something in his voice, the calmness, the sincerity, made it impossible to say no. "All right," she replied quietly. "What time?" That night, Tessa couldn't sleep, not because she was afraid, but because, for the first time in months, it felt like hope was knocking. The next morning, Tessa arrived early. The cafe sat on a quiet corner of Riverton with a small sunlit balcony and the soft scent of cinnamon waffles floating through the air. A far cry from the chaos of Grilltown. She stepped inside, gripping the strap of her bag, her heartbeat uneven, her breath tight. And there he was at a table by the window, where sunlight spilled across a polished wooden surface. No more grey shirt and worn shoes. Today, he wore a deep navy suit, a silk tie, and carried himself with the ease of a man who owned more than just the room he owned, the ground it stood on. "Tessa," he said, rising from his seat and offering his hand. "Thank you for coming. Good morning, Mr. Holt," she said hesitantly. "I'm not sure if I should call you a customer or something else." Mason smiled warmly. "Just call me Mason." Then he nodded slightly. "But if you're looking for a title, I'm the founder and owner of the Grilltown restaurant chain." Tessa froze. It took her a few seconds to fully process what he'd just said. Then her voice cracked as she stammered, You're the owner of the entire chain." "That's right," Mason replied, taking a sip of his coffee. "I often visit locations unannounced. I want to see the truth, not the performance people put on when they know the boss is coming." His gaze met hers, serious now, grounded. "And at the branch where you worked, I saw favoritism, I saw bias, I saw bad leadership. But I also saw something rare, someone who chose to do the right thing, even when no one was standing behind her." Tessa swallowed hard. "I just did what I thought was right. And that," Mason said gently, "is exactly why I want to invite you back." She furrowed her brows. "But I was fired, not as a server." "Tessa," Mason said calmly, "I want you to return as the branch manager." Silence. Long. Heavy. The air around them seemed to freeze. Tessa's eyes widened. "Me, as manager?" "You already have what it takes," he replied. "All I'm doing is giving you the tools." Tessa looked down at her coffee cup, hands trembling slightly. She had always believed life only allowed her a small corner as long as she didn't bother anyone. And now, someone had seen her and was offering her the power to change an entire broken system. She didn't know if she was ready, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She would never forgive herself if she turned this down just because she was afraid. 1 week after that meeting, Tessa stood outside the glass doors of Grilltown. Her hand rested gently on the new nameplate, Tessa Lane. Branch manager, a crisp navy shirt, neatly tied silk tie, and that gleaming name badge on her chest. It wasn't just a uniform. It was a declaration: I'm back. And this time, I won't bow my head. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Inside, time seemed to slow. The sizzling from the grill, the voices calling out orders, even the background music, all of it faded beneath the stunned stares now locked on her. Janice spun around, her hand, mid-wipe on a tabletop, froze in place. Damon nearly dropped a tray of drinks. The other staff, some new, some familiar, stood silent, eyes fixed on her. No one spoke, but their expressions said it all. What is she doing here? Who does she think she is? There's no way. Then came the heavy, all too familiar footsteps from the kitchen. Mark Reynolds, former manager, appeared, apron still tied at his waist, eyes narrowing as they landed on her. And when he saw Tessa, really saw her, and the name badge gleaming proudly on her chest, his face flushed crimson. "What the hell is this?" he hissed, voice seething with fury. "I'm the new branch manager," Tessa replied calmly. "You can confirm it with Mr. Holt if you'd like." Mark's jaw clenched, his voice sharpened to a growl. "You're kidding, right? You really think you've got what it takes to manage this place?" A deep voice rang out from behind. "It's not that she thinks she can, it's that I believe she can." The entire restaurant turned. Mason Holt stepped inside like a gust of cold air, slicing through the heated tension. Charcoal grey suit, commanding posture, he didn't have to raise his voice. The silence came on its own. Mark narrowed his eyes. "You're not serious about this." "I'm absolutely serious," Mason replied without flinching. "And I'm here to deliver the final word." He turned to Mark, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You're fired. Effective immediately." The silence dropped to the floor like a stone. Janice choked back a gasp. Damon stood frozen in place. Tessa didn't move, but inside her, a tidal wave was rising. Mark let out a bitter laugh, clinging to the last scraps of his pride. "You're making a mistake. This place is going to fall apart with her in charge for the first time." Tessa looked him straight in the eyes. No fear, no hesitation. "No, it would fall apart if it kept running on favoritism and the kind of disregard for people you've built here." Mark didn't reply. He simply yanked off his apron, threw it onto the counter, and stormed out. The sound of the glass door slamming behind him wasn't just noise, it was the end of a rotting regime. Tessa stood there, surrounded by stares that were part confusion, part disbelief. She knew this wasn't a victory. It was just the beginning, a new chapter, a real battle. Grilltown under Tessa's leadership would never be the same. But the people who made it what it was were still there, and they weren't exactly cheering for change. On her first official day as manager, the atmosphere was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that hums with tension. No one voiced their objections, no one raised their voice, but the resistance showed itself in every sideways glance, every intentionally slowed step, every whispered comment behind the soda station. Janice, though no longer clinging to Mark, still loomed like a shadow at Tessa's back. She smiled at customers, acted the part, but every time Tessa turned around, something was off. A late order, a burger made wrong, soggy fries sent to a regular customer. and Damon Mark's former right hand now played the part of the neutral observer. He didn't joke, didn't chat, didn't engage, but every move he made carried a quiet undertone. I'm watching, just waiting for you to mess up. Tessa saw it clearly. She wasn't naive. She knew she was stepping into a system that had rotted from the inside, and that wearing the title manager didn't mean she'd earned anyone's respect. Respect had to be earned. So instead of reacting, she listened. She observed who truly cared about the job and who was just clocking in for a paycheck. She took notes on shift patterns, customer feedback, and how staff interacted. She started checking in with the younger employees, the ones who'd been quietly shoved into the worst shifts by Janice but never dared to speak up. And every time something went wrong, she didn't yell. She fixed it on the spot, then quietly wrote it down. But the more Tessa tried to repair, the more she realized how deep the old culture ran. No one confronted her directly, but every gesture, every delay, every look carried the same message: you don't belong here. That night, as Tessa reviewed the end-of-day order log, something didn't sit right. Several receipts had been altered after printing. Tip amounts were missing. Menu prices had jumped for no clear reason. She looked up and caught Damon's eyes flicking toward her from the edge of the counter, just for a split second before he turned away. But it was enough. She saw it, and she knew someone was trying to make her fail. That night, after closing, Tessa didn't head home right away. She sat alone in the office, staring at the shift board, the register logs, and the truth staring back at her. This wasn't just a job. This was a battle to reclaim professional integrity. And if they thought she'd crumble like last time, they were very wrong. Weekend closing shift. Grilltown was packed. Order tickets flying. Printers chirping non-stop. The air thick with the smell of grilled meat and sizzling fries. Tessa stood behind the counter, scanning the floor, monitoring the rhythm. Everything seemed smooth until a loud voice cut through the noise from the front register. "You trying to rip me off?" An older man slammed his hand on the counter. "You tacked on $7 extra for this. You think I don't check prices?" Tessa moved in immediately. "Good evening, sir. I'm the manager here. Let me take a look and help you out." The angry man thrust the receipt toward her. Beside him stood his wife and 2 small grandchildren, half-finished meals on the table in front of them. "I ordered a basic combo meal," he snapped. "The listed price is $11. You tell me what this is." Tessa took the receipt and scanned it quickly. Basic meal. Yes, but the system had added a priority service fee, a surcharge that didn't even exist. A chill crept down her spine. This wasn't a system glitch. It was deliberate. Before she could respond, 2 more customers stepped forward. "I was charged an extra $2, and I got the wrong order twice." The tension in the air tightened like a pulled wire. Frustrated eyes turned toward the front counter. One woman leaned toward the person next to her and muttered just loud enough to be heard, "This stuff never happened when Mark was running things." Tessa swallowed hard. And then, like the final piece falling into place, she saw him. Mark. He was sitting at the back corner table, arms crossed, smirking. And standing right behind him was Janice. Janice stood silently, arms crossed like a director watching the chaos of her own twisted play unfold on stage. Tessa clenched the receipt in her hand. She turned to the evening staff and said, firm and clear, "Pause all new orders. I'll handle every bill, one by one. Anyone overcharged gets a full refund." Without another word, she strode into the office and fired up the system. Within minutes, she pulled up the full transaction log for the evening shift, and there it was, dozens of receipts, tampered with, edited after print, all traced back to one login, Damon's. She marched back to the counter. Damon was fiddling with the espresso machine, pretending not to notice the storm coming. "Damon," she called, her voice sharp and icy. "Office. Now." He glanced at her then, just as quickly, toward Janice in the distance, as if waiting for instruction. But Tessa didn't wait. She stepped forward, holding up the printed log, every edit, every timestamp, every footprint Damon had left behind. That night, after the last customer had gone, Tessa remained in the office alone. On her desk, a stack of fraudulent receipts. On her screen, the system login trail, timestamp by timestamp. And inside her chest, a fire that could no longer be contained. Someone was trying to destroy her, and this restaurant, and they thought she would crumble. But they forgot one thing: Tessa had lost everything before, and she had still gotten back up. It was close to midnight. Grilltown was dark, closed for the night. Only the soft office light flickered against the monitor's glow. Tessa sat motionless, eyes fixed on the system log. Damon. His login showed it all: price edits, fake fees, deleted transaction records. But what made her blood run cold was the timing. Every single change was made after hours outside of his shift. Only someone with closing privileges, someone with manager access, could do that. And that person was Damon. There was no time to hesitate. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed his number. The line rang. Then his sleepy voice came through. "Hello, I need you to come back to Grilltown. Right now. Tessa, it's almost 1 a.m. and you are currently facing revenue fraud allegations," she said flatly, voice steady as steel. "I have evidence. If you don't show up, I'll send it straight to headquarters and the police." Silence. Then a long, heavy sigh cut through the quiet. "I'll come," Damon said. 15 minutes later, he walked in wrinkled t-shirt, tension written across his face. Tessa didn't offer him a seat. She simply turned the monitor toward him. "Do you want to explain this?" Damon swallowed hard. His jaw twitched. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone," he said quietly. "It's just, Janice said it was the only way to teach you a lesson." Tessa's eyes narrowed. "Janice," he nodded. "She said if the store got messy enough, Mr. Holt would think you weren't fit to lead, and then they could bring Mark back." Tessa stood, her voice sharp. "You're saying Mark was behind this?" Damon gave a small nod, then added under his breath, "Actually, Mark was calling the shots. Janice was just the middle. He's still in touch with a few people here. He even paid some of them cash to mess up orders, to create chaos." Tessa could hardly believe what she was hearing. She had thought she was up against a few bitter employees, but in truth, She was fighting an entire underground power play led by the very man who used to sit in the chair she now occupied. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. Damon looked at her, torn. "I know I messed up," he said, "but I don't want to be part of it anymore. If you give me a chance, I'll come clean. I'll take full responsibility." Tessa didn't answer right away. She turned toward the kitchen, the place that, by tomorrow, would light up again, serve customers again, and crumble again, if she didn't rip this rot out by the roots. She turned back to him, her voice steady. "You have a choice. You can walk out right now, or you can stay. Admit what you did in front of the entire team and help me bring all of this to light." Damon raised his head slowly. "I'll stay." Tomorrow, the truth would come out, and Tessa knew there was no turning back. She would expose Mark. She would expose Janice, once and for all. The next morning, the tension inside Grilltown hung like fog. Tessa stepped out of the office, USB drive in hand containing the full system log, transaction history, and a recording of last night's confession. She moved to the center of the dining floor, where the staff were prepping for opening. "Everyone, stop for a moment," she said, her voice calm, but clear and commanding enough that no one could ignore it. Everyone turned. Janice raised an eyebrow, arms crossed, calculated, unbothered. Damon stood quietly behind, but his eyes were steady now, unflinching. Some of the younger staff exchanged whispers, their curiosity rising because they knew the truth was about to be named. Tessa walked to the counter and plugged the USB into the large screen above. A series of data charts appeared: tampered receipts, unexplained fees, login records, all tied to Damon's username. In the past few weeks, Tessa began. This restaurant has faced a wave of complaints about pricing errors, incorrect orders, and delayed service. Her voice was steady, clear, unshaken, and I found out why. She turned to Damon. He took a deep breath, then stepped forward. "It was me," he said. "I edited receipts. I disrupted service. But I didn't act alone." His gaze shifted directly to Janice. Janice gave the orders. And all of this was orchestrated by Mark. Silence, like the air itself was holding its breath. Janice scoffed. "That's rich," she sneered. "And you think people are going to believe you? You're just trying to save yourself. Every word of that is a lie." Tessa didn't flinch. She raised the remote, pressed play. From the speakers, Damon's voice filled the room, tired, but unmistakably clear. Janice said it was the only way to teach Tessa a lesson. And Mark was the one behind it. He's been paying people under the table to mess up orders. They want to bring her down so Mark can come back. A ripple of shock swept through the room. Janice's face flushed red, then pale. Her smirk vanished. "That's enough," Tessa said firmly. "You no longer have any authority here." The front doors swung open. Mason Holt walked in. Janice froze mid-step. Mason didn't look at anyone except Tessa. "How did you handle it?" he asked. Tessa turned to him, calm as if she'd done this 100 times before. "The ones undermining our service culture have been exposed, and I have all the evidence to back it up." Mason gave a single nod. "Then I leave the decision to you." Tessa looked directly at Janice. "You're fired, effective immediately." What Janice exploded. "You don't get to fire me. I'm the one you mocked when I greeted a man in a plain shirt," Tessa replied, her voice unwavering. "And now, I'm the one who believes no one should be punished for choosing kindness." Janice's jaw clenched. She tore off her apron, threw it to the ground, and stormed out, fury in every step. The door slammed shut behind her, and just like that, the chapter closed. But the confrontation wasn't over yet. A familiar voice cut through the calm, this time from the back door. Well, that was quite the cleanup. Everyone turned. Mark. Same smug expression, but this time he stood exposed. No shadows to shield him. No allies left to hide behind. Mason stepped forward. "Mark," he said evenly, "the corporate office is waiting for you. And this time, it's the last time." The moment had arrived. Tessa had turned the tide not with power, but with persistence and truth. 2 weeks later, Grilltown looked and felt reborn. No more cold glances behind the register. No more whispered schemes behind new hires. No more hidden fees or sabotaged orders. In their place, real energy. A warm space. Unified greetings from the entire team. And genuine smiles, ones not calculated for tips, but offered freely. Tessa walked in for the morning shift, coffee in hand. Her name badge branch manager was a little worn now, but solid, just like the role she had claimed and earned. She didn't just take back a title, she restored honor to the place. And this time, she wasn't going anywhere. Drew, her younger brother, had just landed a legal internship downtown. Everything finally seemed to be falling into place. But this time, it wasn't a path she'd been granted. It was one she had built with her own hands. Damon still worked at Grilltown. He didn't quit. He didn't vanish after the day of reckoning. Instead, he stayed. He helped clean up the damage, apologized to every customer he'd wronged, and even volunteered for the late shift on the busiest nights. One of the younger staff whispered to Tessa as Damon walked by. Didn't think he'd change that fast. Tessa just smiled. "No one's born bad," she said. "They've just never been put in the right place." She began holding weekly team meetings where every voice was heard, even the dishwashers. Shifts were assigned based on skill, not on clicks. She reinstated a transparent bonus program, and most boldly of all, she introduced something Grilltown had never seen before, the Second Chance program, a path for employees who had made mistakes, but were willing to make them right. No one thought the idea would get approved. But then, one Friday morning, when Mason Holt made an unannounced visit, he overheard something remarkable from the mouth of a newly hired employee, barely a week in. "Tessa made me feel like I mattered," the new hire said, voice low but steady, "even though I got rejected from 3 other places. After that shift." Mason pulled Tessa aside onto the balcony. "I've managed nearly 80 branches in my career," he said, eyes scanning the skyline. "But I've never seen a place transform its culture this fast." Tessa smiled humbly. "It wasn't me. It's because the people here wanted to change." Mason turned to her with a knowing smile, and they needed someone brave enough to lead them there. That someone was you. Grilltown didn't just survive. It came back to life, order by order, smile by smile, each piece finding its place again. But the most beautiful part wasn't the rising revenue numbers. It was something deeper. A system once run by fear was now thriving on trust. One weekend afternoon, as Tessa was reviewing the weekly reports in her office, her phone buzzed. The name on the screen, Mason Holt. She picked up. "Got a minute this afternoon?" Mason asked, his voice calm but with an edge of unusual seriousness. "Sure. Is something wrong?" "No," he said. "This isn't about Grilltown." "Then what's it about?" "It's about the rest of the system," he said quietly. "And what we build next." This time, the cafe wasn't the cozy corner spot in Riverton. It was a rooftop lounge high above the city, where the entire skyline stretched out like a living blueprint beneath them. Mason was already there. On the table, 2 cups of coffee and a sealed envelope. He didn't waste words. "Tessa," he began, "you proved something I once doubted, that a restaurant doesn't need a numbers genius to thrive. It needs someone who leads with humanity." Tessa sat in thoughtful silence. Mason placed a hand on the envelope. "Grilltown has over 70 branches across the U.S., and at least 9 of them are dealing with exactly what your store faced." He slid the envelope across the table toward her. "I want you to take on the role of regional supervisor overseeing the entire Southern Division, Texas to Louisiana, 12 branches. You'll have full authority to restructure, retrain, and rebuild." Tessa didn't speak. She sat still, a woman who had once been fired for treating a customer with kindness, now being handed the keys to rebuild an entire region in her image. "I don't know what to say," Tessa whispered. Mason smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything right now. Just think it over. This is going to be a different kind of journey. There will be more resistance, but—" He paused, his eyes soft but unwavering. "There will also be more people who need someone like you to step up first so they can find the courage to follow." That evening, Tessa sat by the window of her small apartment. Drew was at the library, preparing for finals, and she was holding the offer letter in her hands. Am I big enough for this role? Or maybe it's because I've been small, overlooked, dismissed that I understand what people really need. She smiled softly. Outside the window, the city lights sparkled like scattered pieces of hope, tiny but bright enough to guide the way. Tessa stood, picked up her phone, dialed Mason's number, and said just one sentence, "I'm ready." 1 month later, Tessa stood in front of the 6th Grilltown branch in her new journey. It was her 3rd store visit that week, another team of employees who didn't yet know her name, but had all heard the story. The one about the manager who was fired for being kind and came back to change everything. She never introduced herself with a title, never used authority to instill fear. Tessa simply observed, listened, and asked each employee just one question. If you could change one thing here, what would it be? At one store, she met a 17-year-old dishwasher, a kid everyone called invisible. At another, a single mom working double shifts passed over for team lead because she didn't flatter the right people. Tessa made no promises, but she wrote everything down, and step by step, store by store, she began doing something no one had believed was possible before. She turned kindness into a system. One day, Tessa received an anonymous letter, handwritten, creased at the edges. I used to be part of the problem, but when I saw you stand up to it, I started wanting to be part of the solution. Thank you for not giving up. Tessa folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her wallet right beside her very first name badge. Still stained with the grease of the day she was fired. One late evening, Tessa returned to the very branch where it all began. Grill Town stood there, lights glowing, customers laughing, staff moving with energy and joy. No one looked at her as the woman who came back from failure, not because they had forgotten her past, but because they had seen the future she was building. Tessa turned to leave, but something echoed clearly in her heart. Change doesn't come from a title. It comes from the right choice made again and again by someone brave enough to begin. If you've ever felt small, overlooked, or been made to apologize for simply being kind, then Tessa's story is your story too. Share this video if you believe kindness is not weakness. It's a quiet power strong enough to reshape an entire system. And if you've ever had to fight just to do the right thing, tell your story in the comments below, because somewhere out there, someone is still holding on, and your voice might be the reason they don't let go.